You waited for the compliment. Maybe you didn't say it out loud, but deep down, you hoped they would see you. Maybe they did. Maybe they said, "You're amazing." Maybe they called you strong, beautiful, selfless. And yet, something didn't land. It floated on the surface like a feather in water. You smiled. You thanked them, but inside, you still felt hollow. And that's the part no one talks about. How validation can feel like air when you're starving for something deeper. You've spent years learning to be the good one, the calm one, the easy-to-love one. You shrink when things feel too much. You brighten when someone needs you. You've trained yourself not to need too much, not to cry too long, not to take up space. Because somewhere back there, someone made you feel like your feelings were too heavy to hold. So now, praise feels like noise. You want to feel full, not just seen. You want to feel safe, not just admired. You want to feel held in your truth, not applauded for your mask. This video is for you. If you've ever questioned why the applause didn't echo in your heart, if you've ever wondered why being liked didn't make you feel loved, if you've ever broken down after being told you were doing great, then you're not alone, because that emptiness isn't a flaw. It's a message, not from the world, but from the part of you you've been trained to ignore, the part of you that knows the truth. We'll walk into that truth, slowly. No lectures, no quick fixes, just a soft unfolding. You might cry, you might feel seen, but more than anything, I hope you finally feel real. So breathe. This isn't content. This is a quiet return to the parts of you you forgot how to listen to. And if this touches something deep in you, if it stirs what's been waiting to rise, subscribe to the channel, not out of habit, but because we are building a space where masks are optional and silence becomes music. Let's begin. You spent your childhood trying to be enough for someone who didn't know how to show up. Not because they were evil, not because they hated you, but because they were drowning in their own pain and no one ever taught you that someone else's inability to love you isn't your fault. So you worked harder, you smiled more, you cleaned up your tears before anyone could see, and you became the kind of person who could adapt to any room, any mood, any version of love, as long as it gave you a few seconds of warmth. That's how it starts. You chase validation not because you're vain, but because it used to be your only way of feeling safe. And safety is a strange thing when it's been inconsistent. You confuse the sound of approval with love. You mistake attention for care. You convince yourself that if you just get it right, if you say the perfect thing, look the perfect way, show up with the perfect balance of softness and strength, then maybe, just maybe, someone will stay. And when they do, when they finally look you in the eye and say, "You're incredible," something inside you breaks, because you thought it would feel different. You thought this would be the moment your heart would finally rest. But it doesn't. It's not that the validation is wrong, it's that it's incomplete. Because what you're really searching for isn't proof that you're valuable. It's proof that you're safe without having to perform. You want someone to love the version of you that isn't dressed up in kindness, isn't carefully filtering every word, isn't managing their comfort like it's your job. You want to be able to collapse and still be held. But most of your life, you've only been loved when you're useful. So you confuse being needed with being wanted. You give more, you try harder, and the hole inside grows deeper because no one ever taught you that love isn't supposed to feel like a job interview. You keep waiting for someone to pick you, but you never asked what if the emptiness isn't about being unchosen? What if it's about never being yourself long enough to feel loved? You learned to survive by becoming what others needed. But now, that same survival pattern is why you don't recognize your own reflection. The validation feels empty because it's landing on a mask. And masks can't absorb love. They can only reflect it back like glass. So the praise bounces off. The compliments slip through. And you're left wondering why the world keeps clapping for someone you don't even feel like you are. That's not your fault. It's just the cost of living in performance mode for too long. But here's the quiet truth you haven't dared to say aloud. You're exhausted. You're tired of curating yourself. Tired of being the one who adjusts first. Tired of asking for nothing and calling it strength. Tired of feeling invisible in rooms where everyone knows your name, but no one knows your pain. And maybe the most painful part is realizing that the emptiness you feel isn't from a lack of validation, but from the absence of your own voice in the room. There was a time you spoke loudly, not with volume, but with presence, when you laughed without checking the room first, when your tears came without apology, before you learned that being lovable meant being easy, before you taught yourself how to disappear while still being right there. That child version of you, they didn't need praise to feel real. They just needed someone to say, "It's okay. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to be good to be loved." But you grew up in a world that mistook quiet pain for politeness. And you adapted. You dimmed your light to fit in. You bent your spine to carry what wasn't yours. You wore, "I'm fine," like a second skin. And now you wonder why you can't feel anything, even when life is going well. You don't lack joy. You lack access. Because the version of you who receives validation isn't the one carrying the wound. It's the polished version, the edited version, the version who knows how to smile through anything and turn ache into applause. So the emptiness stays, not because you are broken, but because the real you, the one buried under years of "I'll just handle it," hasn't been allowed to speak. That's why the praise feels off. It's why compliments feel like cotton candy, pretty but dissolving the second they touch your tongue. You crave connection, but all you're fed is performance. And the truth is, validation without intimacy is just decoration. It looks nice, but it doesn't warm your bones. It doesn't hold you on the nights you feel like unraveling. It doesn't whisper, "You can be messy and I'll still stay." But you didn't grow up with that kind of staying. You grew up with silence, with people who only noticed when you did something right, not when you were hurting. So now, when someone tells you, "You're doing amazing," your nervous system doesn't know whether to celebrate or hide, because part of you is still stuck in a time when love was earned through effort and peace was the reward for perfection. You are praised for being gentle, but no one asks what it cost you to stay that soft. How many times you bit your tongue? How many nights you cried in secret? How many versions of yourself you buried just to make others comfortable? And now the emptiness isn't silence. It's grief. Grief for all the parts of you that never got to be loud. Grief for the child who learned to shapeshift. Grief for the teenager who gave too much too fast, hoping it would make someone stay. Grief for the adult who keeps achieving, keeps smiling, keeps helping, and wonders why they still feel unseen. That grief is sacred. It's not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something inside you is ready to return. You keep thinking that once you're healed, you'll finally feel full. But healing isn't a trophy you win. It's not a place you arrive with a smile and a checklist. It's a slow unlearning of who you were taught to be, and an even slower remembering of who you were before the world made you shrink. And in that remembering, there's a strange kind of loneliness. Because when you stop performing, some people stop clapping. When you stop overgiving, some people disappear. When you finally say, "I'm not okay," you realize how many people only loved you for your strength, and that hurts. It really, really hurts. Because for so long, you thought you were building connection, but now you're seeing it was often conditional. That's the cruel irony of validation. It teaches you to become lovable, not to believe you already were. So now, when someone says, "You're so kind," you flinch a little, not because kindness is wrong, but because you wonder, do they love your warmth, or do they need your silence? You start asking yourself hard questions. Am I being appreciated or used? Do they admire me? Or do they depend on me to keep the peace? Is this praise a reflection of who I am, or just who I've become to keep people close? And maybe the hardest question of all, do I even know the difference anymore? But underneath those questions, there's something even deeper waking up. The part of you that isn't hungry for validation, but for truth. The part that doesn't want to be admired for your selflessness, but loved for your fullness. The part that doesn't want to keep earning a seat at the table, but wants to build a table of your own. And that part, it doesn't care how many likes you get. It doesn't care how many times they call you strong. It just wants to feel real again. That's why the praise leaves you cold, because it's being directed at a version of you that's been surviving, not living. You don't want applause. You want recognition, not for what you do, but for who you are when you're not trying. And maybe that's what this emptiness has been trying to say all along, that you're ready to stop trying, to stop auditioning for love, to stop contorting yourself into someone who deserves it, to stop collecting compliments like currency, as if one more, "You're amazing," will finally fix the ache. It won't, because what you really crave isn't on the outside. It's in the moment you finally say, "I'm tired of being what everyone needs. I want to be what I need. And if that costs me a few claps, so be it." You used to call it overthinking. You told yourself you were just sensitive, that maybe if you stopped caring so much, you'd stop feeling so empty. But it wasn't too much care. It was too little return. You gave love like it was water, even when your own well was dry. You bent until you cracked, and when people said, "You're amazing for always being there," you smiled, even as a quiet scream echoed in your chest. That scream? It was the part of you asking, "But when will someone show up for me?" You never got to say it, because every time you tried, someone made it about them, or changed the subject, or looked at you like you were the ungrateful one. So you stopped asking. You stopped crying where anyone could hear it. You stopped needing out loud. You became low maintenance to the point of disappearing. And still, you hoped the validation would fill you. You told yourself, if I just become better, stronger, more successful, more useful, they'll finally see me. But they only ever saw the version of you that didn't ask for much. And now you're waking up to the cost of that silence. Because validation that comes from being invisible isn't love. It's a transaction, and you were never meant to be a product. You are not the helper, the fixer, the quiet one, the one who always has it together. That's just the role you learn to play to keep people close. But the real you, the one who gets messy, the one who doesn't smile when she's breaking, the one who sometimes needs to be held without being needed, she's aching to come home. And she's the one who never felt the praise. Because it wasn't for her. It was for the version of you that adapted, that adjusted, that disappeared in the name of peace. So of course the words felt hollow. They weren't landing on your soul. They were landing on the armor. And praise doesn't nourish armor. It just polishes it. But you don't want to be polished. You want to be known. Known in the way that doesn't require explanation. Known in the way that stays even when you say, "I'm not okay right now." You want someone to see the cracks and not flinch. To witness your softness without mistaking it for weakness. To meet your eyes on the days you fall apart and say, "You don't have to impress me, I'm already here." And maybe, just maybe, you're realizing that someone has to be you. Because the first love that fills the emptiness will never be from the outside. It's the one that says, "I see you, I believe you, and I'm not leaving myself again." Not because you've given up, but because you finally understand that what you were reaching for was never yours to begin with. You were chasing validation like oxygen, hoping that if you breathed in enough approval, you'd stop feeling like you were drowning. But the breath you needed wasn't out there. It was the inhale you denied yourself. Every time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't. Every time you let someone walk all over your boundaries, just to avoid the sting of being called too much. Every time you laughed at a joke that hurt, just to stay likable. That kind of self-abandonment is slow. So slow, you barely notice it at first. But over time, you stop hearing your own voice. You start mistaking the applause for belonging. You start believing that worth is something to be earned, not remembered. And so the emptiness grows, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your soul is starving for something real, something that can't be found in likes, or titles, or the sound of, "You're so inspiring." You don't need to be inspiring. You need to be allowed to rest, to rage, to be soft, to be sharp, to not know who you are for a while without being punished for it. Because when people only love your shine, you learn to hate your shadows. But it's in the shadows where the truth lives. The truth that you don't want to be the strongest one in the room anymore. The truth that being resilient has become a prison. The truth that the praise hurts because it keeps rewarding the parts of you that are still bleeding. And no one is coming to stop the bleeding but you. Not because others don't care, but because they were never taught how to hold what they can't fix. So you learn to hold yourself, but not in the way you used to, not with grit, or grit your teeth survival. With gentleness, the kind of gentleness that says, you don't have to hustle for love today. You don't have to shrink to be chosen. You don't have to entertain your way into connection. You just have to come home. To the girl who used to draw hearts in notebooks, hoping someone would notice. To the boy who stood up straighter whenever his dad walked into the room. To the one who kept smiling even after the door slammed. They're still in you, still waiting for someone to tell them you're allowed to be real, even if it's messy, even if no one claps. That's how the healing begins. Not with another compliment, not with another gold star, but with the quiet, trembling decision to love yourself louder than the silence ever did. You used to think that love meant being easy, easy to handle, easy to praise, easy to need, but never need back. So you became agreeable, pleasant, predictable. You wore smiles like armor. and silence like duty, because deep down, you believe that if you were too loud, too sad, too opinionated, they'd leave. And maybe they did once. Maybe the first time you showed your real feelings, someone called you dramatic, or selfish, or too much. So you shut the door on your own truth and called it maturity, or strength, or being the bigger person. But let's be honest, that wasn't strength, it was survival. And now, years later, the praise still doesn't land, because it's not touching the part of you that's still grieving. Grieving what? The freedom of being seen in your full truth without having to be impressive. Grieving the years spent earning affection in spaces that only celebrated your silence. Grieving the version of you who never got to say, "I'm not okay," without worrying who'd walk away after. You keep receiving compliments that sound like a celebration, but feel like a mirror held up to someone you're pretending to be. You're so strong, and you wonder if they'd still say that. If they saw the way you collapse alone at night. You're so giving, and you wonder if they'd still admire you, if they knew how much of yourself you've lost in the giving. You're so calm, and you wonder if they'd love you if you screamed. That wonder, it's the part of you that knows. You've never really been loved in your wholeness, only in your usefulness. And that's not love, that's strategy. You strategized your way into acceptance, became the perfect partner, friend, child, employee, always available, always kind, always okay. But somewhere in the middle of being everyone's anchor, you forgot how to ask for your own life raft. Now, when someone validates you, it feels like they're patting your costume, not because their words aren't sincere, but because you don't believe they'd stay if the costume fell off. And the hardest part is, you're right about some of them. Some people are only there for the performance. They only know how to love you when you're convenient. They disappear when your healing gets messy, when your truth becomes uncomfortable, when your sadness takes too long. But not everyone. Not always. And the only way to find out is to start showing up unpolished. It's terrifying. It risks rejection. But it also opens the door for something you've never really known. Love that lands. Not praise. Not admiration. Not applause. But love that sees your scars and stays. Love that hears your, "I can't do this today," and doesn't ask you to try harder. Love that says, "You're still good." Even here, that kind of love doesn't come from validation. It comes from truth. And truth only rises when you stop performing. There's a silence that feels heavy, not because no one is speaking, but because everything inside you is screaming, and you've trained yourself not to make a sound. You sit in rooms full of people who admire you, but feel lonelier than when you were by yourself. Because being admired isn't the same as being understood. They praise your light, but never ask what it costs you to keep it on. And you wonder, what would happen if you stopped shining for a moment? Would they notice? Would they care? Would they stay? That's the question that keeps you running. Not toward the love, but away from abandonment. You don't crave applause. You crave someone who will sit with you when there's nothing to applaud. But when all you've ever known is conditional connection, the idea of being loved in your shadow feels foreign, scary, almost impossible. So you keep earning, smiling, soothing. You become a safe space for others, while your own heart goes unheld, and the emptiness deepens, because validation that only reaches your image can't touch your soul. You want someone to say, "I see through the strength, I see the ache, and I'm not leaving." But to be seen like that, you have to stop hiding. You have to tell the truth, that you're not always okay, that your boundaries aren't a betrayal, that your softness isn't weakness, that sometimes being praised makes you feel even more alone. Because when someone says, "You're amazing," what you want to say back is, "I'm tired," not to argue, not to dismiss the kind words, but to finally speak from where it hurts, not where it performs. You want to lay your armor down, to walk into a room, and not wonder what version of you is safest, to cry without rushing to clean it up, to laugh without watching if it's too loud. You want to be free, and the wild thing is, you always could be, but you needed someone to say it first, to model it, to show you that love isn't lost when you show your whole self. So let me say it now. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to shrink to stay safe. You don't have to disappear to be lovable. The emptiness you feel after validation, it's not a failure. It's a signal, a deep, soul-level call to return to the place you left yourself. Because all the praise in the world can't fill the space where you've gone missing. Only truth can do that. Only you can do that. And it starts here, with the quiet, trembling choice to stop being what they want and start becoming who you are. There will be days when you still reach for it. The quick fix of affirmation, the sweet sugar of being seen, and that's okay. You're not wrong for wanting to be loved. You're not weak for wanting someone to notice. You're human. But now you notice something different. The compliment doesn't land the way it used to, because you've tasted something deeper, what it feels like to be honest. And once you've spoken from your truth, validation loses its shine unless it echoes something real. Not, "You're doing great," but "I see how hard this island." Not, "You're so strong," but "You shouldn't have had to be." Not, "You're amazing," but "You're allowed to fall apart with me." That's the shift. The quiet revolution. You begin to value resonance over recognition. You crave depth over display. You stop chasing people who love your performance and start standing still so the ones who love your presence can find you. The emptiness doesn't vanish overnight, but it softens, because now, when you feel it rising, you don't rush to cover it. You listen. You ask, what am I still trying to prove? Who am I still performing for? Where did I abandon myself today? And then you come back to your body, back to your breath, back to the part of you that doesn't need a spotlight to feel worthy of love. You start building a life that feels full, even when no one is watching, a life that whispers, "I am enough," not because someone said it, but because you remembered. And when someone does offer praise, you let it in gently, but you no longer use it as proof of your value. You don't need it to breathe, because the foundation is no longer made of applause. It's made of truth, of boundaries, of rest, of joy that doesn't require explanation, of love that begins and ends with how you treat yourself when no one is looking. So if you're here, feeling that emptiness, after being told how wonderful you are, I want you to know this: there is nothing wrong with you. You are not ungrateful. You are not broken. You are just ready to stop being admired for surviving and start being loved for existing. And if this stirred something in you, if your heart nodded even once, then you're not alone. You never were. And if this space gave you even a moment of breath, a flicker of truth, a glimpse of what it feels like to be home inside yourself, then stay. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. Not out of obligation, but because we're building something rare here, a space where the masks fall away and the soul gets to speak. And maybe, just maybe, you'll come back, not because you're looking for validation, but because you're remembering you never needed it to be whole.